If you've been charged with a DWI, you might be required to install an ignition interlock device in your vehicle, but for how long, when, and can you get it off early? Hi, my name is Rob Chesnutt. I'm an Austin criminal defense attorney, and today I'm going to walk through some of the different times that you're going to need to install an ignition interlock because it's not one size fits all. There are different scenarios where you're going to need to install an ignition interlock device, and for most of these you're going to want to talk to your attorney, but the first one would be for bond conditions, and if you've been ordered by a judge after your arrest to install an ignition interlock device, you might not have an attorney yet. Now you have to be very careful here. I made another video about some deceptive mailers that look like they're from the court. They're not actually from the court. They're from a private company saying that you need an ignition interlock device when you really don't. You don't need an IID for every single DWI, so make sure you're reading the court paperwork. If that says that you have a bond condition that you need an ignition interlock device, follow that court paperwork. Don't rely on mailers from private companies. Now, a bond condition is something that the judge will give you that requires you to follow certain rules while you're out on bond awaiting trial. It doesn't mean that you've been convicted, but these are some rules that you have to follow, and it's generally for the safety of the community. So what the judge is saying is, you got charged with the DWI, so for the safety of the community, we're going to ask you to install an ignition interlock device in your car where you have to blow each time before you start the car to make sure that you haven't been drinking alcohol. And it's a burden on you, and you haven't been convicted yet, but this is something that the courts are willing to go ahead and do even though you haven't been convicted. Now, bond conditions aren't put on every single DWI, but for pretty much every felony DWI, very many second DWIs, and then when the DWI is up over 0.15, a lot of times the judge is going to require the ignition interlock for bond. The second way you might be ordered to install an ignition interlock device is that if it's required as a probation condition. A probation condition is after you've pled guilty and you are placed on probation by the judge, or if you've been found guilty by a jury and placed on probation, the judge can order as one of the conditions of probation that you have an ignition interlock device, and that could be for the entire duration, or it can be for only half or even a quarter. So you're looking at between 6 months and 2 full years of an ignition interlock device. A lot of my clients ask me if you can get that off early, and the answer is yes, sometimes, but it does require an order from the judge. So if you are required to do 2 full years of IID on a probation, you'd have to either hire an attorney or approach the judge yourself and ask that judge to reduce the term at maybe a year, and you could get that reduced to half term. It's much better to negotiate that length down at the plea bargaining process, and a lot of times that is possible. A third reason you're going to be installing an IID in your car is with a voluntary install. This is where you choose to go and install it in your vehicle. Now you might be asking, why would you do that? Well, it could be a part of a plea agreement. Perhaps the prosecutor would be willing to reduce the other consequences of the DWI or reduce it down to an obstructing a roadway, or it might be for a pretrial diversion agreement. In Travis County, the pretrial diversion for DWIs requires 6 months of IID. So once you get that 6 months done and some other requirements, you can actually get your DWI completely dismissed. So there are a lot of good reasons to voluntary install, but obviously talk to your attorney about the pros and cons of doing that. Now, some FAQs about IIDs. First of all, how much does it cost? Well, I do a separate video that discusses all the different vendors because some of them have different pricing, but generally between $70 and $150 for install, between $60 and $80 a month. But check out that other video for details on these specific vendors in Travis County. Second, what if you don't have a car? Does that mean that you're getting out of the IID? Well, yes and no. So if you don't have a car, what the court is typically going to order is that you either have a PAM device, a portable alcohol monitor, or a SCRAM device, which is a device that fits around your ankle and monitors your alcohol at all times. Both of these are not quite as good as the IID, and they're more expensive than the IID. So typically, if you do have a car, the IID is going to be preferred. And if you don't have a car, it might be worth trying to go ahead and get that car so that you can have an IID. The SCRAM device in particular is very invasive. It's hard to take a shower. It'll have bad readings, and it's constantly monitoring your alcohol on your skin. It can cause irritations and a lot of bad things. The PAM device is not as bad, but you still have to blow on a schedule, and a lot of people forget. We're just humans, so when you forget to blow on that schedule, it creates a violation and can cause problems with the courts. So IID is typically preferred over those other options, but of course if you don't have a vehicle, you would have to fall back to one of those plan Bs. So the bottom line on these IIDs is what we want to do is limit them. Of course, we want to use it as a tool to reduce your DWI if we can, or get the DWI dismissed. We want it to work for us, not against us. But in those cases where you are required to have an IID, we want to limit that to 6 months or even 4 months or less if we can, so that you can get on with your life. Nobody wants to have this annoyance and this burden put on their vehicle, so they have to blow every time they start their car. Sometimes you have to blow while you're driving. I don't consider that very safe, but that is required sometimes. So if you are facing DWI charges and you'd like to talk about it, you can always give us a call or visit us at atx.legal.